Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Anthony McAdoo, Executive Director of the WKU Alumni Association. We're pleased to welcome you to our webinar series with today's focus on professional development, DISC self-assessment and analysis. These webinars, our Hilltopper at Work webinars, are produced in cooperation with our colleagues in Career and Professional Development, or the Center for Continuing Professional Development, tongue-tied today, and honored today to have coordinator with that program, Karen Idell, with us to introduce today's speaker.
Well, thank you, Anthony. We hope you enjoy today's session and find it helpful to your own professional development needs. If you are looking for professional development or non-credit training options for your workforce, please contact our office, the Office of Continuing and Professional Development, or visit our website at wku.edu/CPD for more information. Today, we are pleased to welcome Amy Talecki as our presenter. Amy is a certified trainer with the American Society for Training and Development. She has worked with WKU's Career and Workforce Training Development team since 2001, providing employee training programs for numerous businesses and industries throughout our area. In her time with WKU, Amy develops and delivers a wide range of courses, including communications, writing, customer service, leadership, and team development, just to name a few. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the program over to Amy to get started with today's topic on the DISC assessment. So welcome, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Kara, and thank you, Anthony, for that introduction, and welcome back if you've been tuning in for the series. This is the fourth in 5 that we have offered in conjunction with alumni. So happy to be here to talk to you about DISC, understanding yourself and others. So it's a lot to cover. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into today's content and share with you what the objectives are for these next few moments that we're going to spend together. First of all, the DISC is a tool that can help us to understand our own behavioral tendencies and also begin to gain an understanding of how our behavior affects others. So we know that to be true, that all day, every day, in all of our interactions, our behavior is going to be impacting those that we are around. And so we'll understand a better understanding of that, hopefully. We all know, this is no big newsflash here to anybody, we do not all behave in the same way. And so we approach things differently. We certainly communicate in different ways. And we're going to hopefully find out as we look at this DISC tool that really there's beauty in that diversity. So as we begin to learn about other styles that may not be our own, hopefully we can begin to respect and appreciate and understand and certainly value those individual differences. When we gain that knowledge, then I think that we really can be in the business of beginning to try to strategize and be able to communicate in a much more effective way, to be able to work more effectively together. And then, of course, then the end product is that increased productivity when we're not having to work through misunderstandings and we begin to understand where people are coming from and why they're coming from there. It can really begin then to enhance us being able to accomplish many things at work. And then finally, to increase your effectiveness by improving your relationships with others. So when I begin to understand that you're not just behaving in a certain way to get on my nerves, it's coming from somewhere and there's something that's driving that behavior, then I can possibly then take some steps to be more accommodating and kind of meet that person where they are, even if their style is vastly different than mine. So why is it important to understand behavior, especially thinking about in a workplace situation? So we've already indicated that all day, every day, our behavior impacts other people, right or wrong, good or bad. We're going to be impacting people just based on how we're behaving. So it's important to understand behavior because it does improve our own self-awareness. We begin to understand why we behave in certain ways and why we communicate in certain ways. And it just makes you more aware of how you are maybe coming across or maybe being misunderstood by someone else. It also then helps us to understand why people act the way they do, and begin to perhaps adapt to their behavior, particularly if their behavior is very different than mine. Then I can understand where that, that person doesn't act like me, and I don't really understand that. You begin to understand why that person behaves in a certain way. And when we understand that, then we can kind of meet them where they are. As we said, we can learn to work together much more productively when we begin to understand how people communicate and how they appreciate being communicated with. We're going to find that DISC, as far as communication is concerned, the person's communication style is probably going to be your number one indicator as to what their preferred DISC style is. And so when I begin to understand that, like I said, then we alleviate a lot of those personnel issues when we begin to understand that. And then we are, of course, then much more productive in our work. Learning this DISC tool can also help you to transform conflict into collaboration. So conflict is inevitable. We know that that is going to happen, and it's not a bad thing. Many times that's what keeps us innovative and solving problems and finding better solutions. But when we understand somebody's DISC style, which really then also is going to impact how they manage through conflict, then we can manage through that conflict in a healthy way and become much more collaborative and be able to arrive at those better solutions and those innovations. It can also help us to develop stronger sales skills. If that is part of what you do, when I begin to understand, if I have a client that I'm trying to sell to, and if I understand their behavioral approach, then I can tailor my presentation to meet those needs that person has based on what their primary style is. We can become much more effective in managing people. It's not one size fits all. You know that. We already know that the way you manage one person may not work for another person. So we can begin to be much better managers of the folks that we lead if we can begin to understand where their behavior is coming from. And then ultimately, we can get more enjoyment out of every relationship. So of course, we're looking at this DISC model in the context of the workplace, but it goes way beyond that. Every person has a primary DISC style, and that's the people that you interact with just personally, the people that you live with, your spouse, your children, whomever. When we begin to understand where that behavior lies and how they approach things and how they communicate, then we can begin to build better relationships even outside of the workplace. All right, so let's talk about first then kind of this DISC theory, what it is, what it's not. I'll just introduce you to the theory itself, which was developed in 1928 in his book, The Emotions of Normal People. Dr. William Marsden began to develop and establish that he thought that there were four very distinct behavioral styles that most people are going to have. They're going to have a primary style, and he began to develop this theory as to what governs these different styles and how different people fall into them. Then in 1940, the first actual DISC profile, the actual assessment where people could go in and begin to discover what their particular DISC style might be, was created by Walter Clark, which was certainly based upon Marston's theory that was delivered in that book in 1928. And now in 2021, a half century plus later, DISC is one of the most widely used assessment tools in the world, particularly when it comes to workplace and thinking about work approaches and team roles and communicating as a team. So it has really enjoyed honestly a resurgence in very recent history, where people are kind of hearkening back and going back to this and figuring out that this is one of the best tools that you can have in the workplace environment to begin to understand and work together more productively. So DISC theory is all based on behavior. And so I'd like to contrast that with another psychologist, Carl Jung, developed the Myers-Briggs test. So he was all about personality and looking at personality. And personality and behavior, of course, we all know, are very much entwined with one another. So we have personality characteristics. There's you're born with some innate things, and then your personality develops based on kind of just your nature and the nurture aspect. So not only kind of, born that way, but also raised in an environment that also is going to help to define that personality. And so developmental psychologists will tell us that your personality is pretty much in place by the time you're about school age. So by the time a child is about 5 or 6 years old, their personality is probably, barring any type of trauma or anything, just in normal circumstances, is your personality is going to be what it's going to be by the time you're about ready to go to school, 5 or 6 years old. And so that personality is very difficult to change. It is what it is. And so when we think about Jung and his theory, and then from his theory, the Myers-Briggs inventory was developed, and many other personality assessments that have been used throughout the years. Was developed from that personality theory. So that looked more at, how we think and how we process information. And so the difference then with Marsden's theory with DISC is that he said, sure, we've got a personality and it's innate, and behavior's innate to a certain extent, but behavior so hinges not only on what's going on innately and internally with somebody, but is largely impacted by the external environment. So in other words, where personality does not change, it doesn't come much off of that personality that you're going to have when you're about 5 or 6 years old. Behavior changes all the time. And so we know that to be true. And so I think that's why the DISC model, particularly when we think about work environments, is very, very valuable, because we can see behavior, we can identify behavior, and we can modify behavior. It's very difficult to modify your personality. I always share a story talking about this, and that as Kara indicated in my introduction that she gave at the beginning of the session here, I've been working as a trainer here with career and workforce development for a little over 20 years now. And so as a trainer, I many times am walking into a room full of people I've never seen before in my life, and I've got to somehow get them engaged and interested in the material that I'm going to be delivering at that time, and get them involved in it. And so I have a very outgoing, gregarious personality. That's who I was when I was 5 or 6 years old. I was the kid that the teacher had to move all around the room because I would talk to, I was not discriminating at all. I would talk to anybody. And if I couldn't get the kids to talk to me, I'd get the teacher engaged. So I'm very, very outgoing. I love people. I love interacting with people. It gives me energy. And that serves me well, certainly as a trainer, when I've got to walk into a room full of strangers and kind of jump in and get them involved. So that serves me well, and that's great. But about 5 or 6 years ago, here in our office, we had several vacancies. We were in the process of hiring 2 full-time positions. And so we just really did not have the staff here to be able to do all the administrative things. And so I was asked, when you're not out training, doing your normal thing, would you be willing to come in and just do some administrative stuff? And I said, sure, that'd be great. So I came into my new work environment. And of course, I already know all these people. At that point, been working here for 14 or 15 years. And so I come in and sit down in the office that first day, to come and answer phones and run copies and do all those type of administrative duties. And our environment here in the office here at Nicely is very much an open air kind of concept. So you walk in, it's a great big room, and there are several desks that are just right out there in the open. There's no cubicles, there's no doors to shut, anything like that. It's just kind of open environment. And that first day I came in, and I'm used to being a trainer. And so I came in and I just did what I normally did. And I'm talking all the time, and I'm, getting distracted and, just saying everything that occurs to me. And pretty soon I started getting some nonverbal communication from my coworkers that was basically saying, can you shut up and just answer the phone and do what you've been hired to do in this capacity? And I thankfully got that clue pretty quickly and said, oh, wait a minute, my environment has changed. Yes, it's still my work environment, but my work environment looks very different than it typically does. And I'm here to do these administrative things and not to train people. So I was able to rein that in a little bit and go, okay, I don't have to say everything that occurs to me here. My environment has changed, and those expectations have changed. And so I was able to change my behavior. I was able to modify that behavior. Did I change my personality? Absolutely not. I still wanted to talk, but I could modify that behavior to accommodate the situation that I found myself in. So therein lies really the big differentiating thing between when we think about those Myers-Briggs personality assessments, which are also very important. But with the DISC, we look at what our default behavioral styles are. And then we do really have those tools to understand, okay, I'm working in an environment, or I'm working with a person that this particular style is not working with. Let me modify that a little bit and see if I can be a little bit more productive. And so I was able to do that. So just to kind of clarify what those different sides of things are. Again, as we said, personality and behavior are very much intertwined, but behavior is changeable, where personality really is very difficult to change. So behavior then is observable. We can see people acting in a certain way. We can hear how they're communicating. And so the DISC model, I think, in contrast to some of those other personality assessments or inventories, is much more easily, quickly understood. It is not difficult at all to begin to figure out what somebody's primary DISC style is. As we go through and look at the snapshots of each of these styles, I think you'll be able to very quickly understand probably where you lie, and those that you work with, perhaps what their primary style is. So it's observable. It's not hard to look and begin to look at those clues and identify what somebody's particular DISC style is. Frankly, I can roll through a drive-through over here at McDonald's and probably tell you that person that waited on me through that drive-through. Even in that quick exchange, I could probably get a pretty good guess as to what their particular DISC style is. So it's not hard at all. It's observable. It's situationally based. Just as I shared in that example, my situation changed. And so as my situation changes, we don't act the same way all the time. It depends on that environment that we're in. So it is very much situationally based. It's flexible. Again, in my example, I was able to flex my behavior a little bit. Even though that's not my default style, I was able to come off of whatever my default, my kind of comfort zone is, to accommodate that situation. So we certainly can flex our behavior. And behavior is also predictable. It really is. We work with a certain person for a long period of time. We can begin to predict what their reaction is going to be to something. Those people that you live with, you can probably guess what, in any given situation, what their response is going to be, because behavior is predictable. So when you think about the assessment, and of course, this is just a webinar about the content today, were you to come take the 4-hour DISC assessment class with us, which I would highly recommend for any department or workplace, the assessment is it's pretty involved, and it does some things and it doesn't do some things. So first of all, when people take the assessment, I always tell them there are no right or wrong answers, that you can't fail it. It's not a test, but you do come to a conclusion as to what your default style is and kind of where you score high and low in all of those dimensions. And it's important to know that there is no DISC style that is superior or inferior to another one. They're not all good. There's not one that's all good or one that's all negative. Every profile is going to possess both strengths and weaknesses. So as we're going to find out, strengths and weaknesses, we really kind of come in there and fill the gap. So what one style's strength might be somebody else's weakness. And that's the beauty of having a lot of diversity on a team when it comes to these styles. So another thing about the assessment is that while you do find out, and as we look at these descriptors and begin to investigate these styles, you'll identify probably what yours is. But you are not just one style. So everybody has a default style. Everybody's going to have a style that they operate out of most of the time and are most comfortable with. But we really use all of these styles all the time, just again, based on the situation and what that situation is calling for. So while we do have a default, we do have one that's in our comfort zone. We are shades of all the styles. And if you were to take the full assessment, you would see that it's impossible to score a 0 on one of the dimensions. So we have those shades in there, but we do also have that one that we gravitate to the most. The other thing is that DISC, it's certainly a tool. It is a very valuable tool. And this is probably, to my mind, this might be the session that I do that I see the most light bulbs go off in where people start to really piece together and go, oh, okay, so that's why that person communicates this way, or that's why that person approaches problems in this manner. So it's not a tool it is certainly a tool, but it's not a tool to just put a label on, because as we said, yeah, I can probably figure out what somebody's primary style is, but that's not all of who they are. But it does give us this vocabulary to be able to improve our communication and to adapt to behaviors, particularly behaviors that might be very different from my own, and making those interactions much more effective and enjoyable, and certainly more productive when we think about working together in the workplace. So just to show you what the model looks like here, and this slide will appear three or four times as we go through the material here. So this is based on Marston's book again, which, by the way, I meant to tell you a little fun fact about Marston, if you're ever on Jeopardy, is that he also not only wrote that book that kind of got the disc theory started, but he was also the creator of Wonder Woman. So there's your trivia for today. But this is based on his model. And he said that we can very easily place people in 4 what we call primary style categories. And so they are, as you see here, the first one in the green there is dominance. So at the top left-hand quadrant there, this is the D style, and it's the DISC, of course, because that's just the acronym for the words here that he uses to describe each of the behavioral styles there. So D for dominance, the one in red here is I for influence, down below it, steadiness, which is the S style, and then over here in the yellow, conscientious, or the C style. So the things that govern this style, each of the styles, and you'll see that it's twofold here. So if you look at the left-hand side of the model, where dominance and conscientious lie, you'll notice that they have what we call a task orientation. So over there on the left-hand side, you'll see that they are all about getting a task done. Now, it's going to be different how they get that done and what that looks like, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But they are what we say more task-oriented. Whereas if we look at that right-hand side of the model, the influence and the steadiness, or the I and the S there, these folks are going to have more of a people focus. So they are more concerned about people and relations and those things. That's not to say that the other styles, that D's and C's are not concerned with people, or I's and S's are not concerned with tasks, because that's just simply not true. But that's when we look at what really kind of governs how they approach things or how they're communicating, this task approach or people approach is going to inform that for us. All right, so then if we bust that model apart looking north and south, or top and bottom there, you'll notice that dominance and influence, they're going to share that upper portion of the quadrant, because these folks, and this has everything to do with communication and what type of communicators they are. So these people are going to be much more outgoing. They are going to be much more apt to tell you what they are thinking and to be verbal about that. In addition to that, both the D's and the I's share a pace, and they are both much more fast-paced, in contrast to the bottom two, the conscientious and the steadiness. So the conscientious and the steadiness, then again, if we look at how they communicate, in contrast to that top portion, they're going to be much more reserved. They're going to be a little closer to the vest. They're going to be, they're really, both of them really, processing things internally, rather than just kind of, in contrast to the D and the I, just kind of saying what comes to mind. So they're going to be much more thoughtful and in their heads thinking about things before they're going to offer information, perhaps. And then also, in contrast to the D and the I, they're going to be working in a much slower pace, because they are so thoughtful and they are really working through everything internally before they come external with it. So they're going to be working and doing that and being very diligent and thoughtful about how they're processing things, and then also how they communicate that. So if we look at these 4 quadrants, and this is just to kind of, in a nutshell, to help explain what's driving the behavior of each of these primary styles. We'll notice that the D up there, remember, they're task-oriented and they're going to be more outgoing, more verbal. Their primary intention with their behavior is that they want to get it done. They want to get it done, right? That fast pace, we'll see as we begin to pick these apart. They're very decisive. They're all about action. So they are all about getting it done. Now, if we drop down to the conscientious folks here. So again, they share that task focus with the Ds. But remember, they're much slower paced, and they're really thinking things through and being very analytical. So when we look at what their behavioral intent, what's driving their behavior is, they want to get it right. They're all about quality and accuracy and making sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and all those things are taking care of all of those details. So yes, they are all about getting it right. So D's are get it done. C's are get it right. You'll notice that pronoun there, it, that's your task, right? So that's why we say that they are task oriented, that it is the task, whatever that it may be. All right, so if we go over to the right-hand side and look at our I's and our S's, so we remember that they share that people focus or relationship focus. So I's are very influential. They're going to probably be very charismatic and very convincing. A lot of times, they're great communicators. We already know that they're very outgoing. They're running around and flitting around and got a lot of energy, and so they're working at a very fast pace. And so their behavioral intent is they want to get that approval or get that appreciation from people. And then if we drop down and look at that steadiness, that final one, also that people orientation, but again, a little more reserved. You see that very word that denotes the S, and that steadiness, and they truly are. They just want everything to be okay. They want everybody to be okay. And so their behavioral intent, what drives their behavior, is they just want to get along. So if we look at the two behavioral intents over here on the I and the S side, get appreciated, get along. Well, who do we get appreciation from? Who do we get along with? It's people. So there's that people orientation that's driving both sides, or both of those styles on that side. But it's a little different again, because if we bust it apart from north to south, that I is going to be more influential and trying to use their power in that way, where the S's are just kind of going to be loyal and do what you need them to, but they're just really focused on getting along. So just in a nutshell, that's what that looks like. So we'll begin now to look real specifically at each of these styles and kind of what makes up each of these styles. And again, these are the primary styles. So as we look at the D first there, some of the adjectives that we would use to describe somebody who has that primary or high D style is that they are, a lot of D words there, they're driven, they're direct, they're decisive, they're strong-willed, they're very self-confident, they're daring, they're determined. And as we already indicated, they're working at that fast pace. So they're getting it done. Remember, that's their behavioral intent. And so those are some words that would definitely describe. I love music, so it's like my favorite thing. And when we do a class, I always try to get people to come up with a theme song for each of the styles. And so I think Taking Care of Business, Bachman Turner Overdrive would be a great theme song for a D, because they are all about taking care of the business. Or perhaps My Way by Frank Sinatra. Notice they're strong-willed and determined and self-confident. So those would be some words that would, or some song titles that would kind of help define that D style for us. So as we look at that dominant style, and begin to look at kind of what motivates that behavior and what their strengths and weaknesses are, they emphasize shaping the environment by overcoming oppositions and challenges. So that D style really welcomes a challenge. They thrive on a challenge because they want to get it done, and they are confident that they're going to get that done. So they're emphasizing, they feel like that they have power over that environment just within themselves to do something. Their strengths, that they are the people who are going to get immediate results. They're going to act. They're going to accept those challenges. We said that they are going to be very welcoming of those challenges, and they're going to make some quick decisions. Remember, they've got that fast pace, and they're thinking always, and so they have no problem being decisive and making those quick decisions. They're motivated by challenge. As we said, they like to be in places of power. They like to drive the bus, so to speak. They like direct answers. They're very direct communicators. We're going to look more at communication as we go through here, but they are very direct in their communication. You don't have to ever wonder what a D's thinking. They've already told you in no uncertain terms. So that's one way we can identify that person that just will pop right off and tell you exactly what they think. They are motivated by those opportunities for individual accomplishments. They are very goal-driven folks. They are motivated by freedom from direct control. They like to kind of be in charge if possible. And they value new and varied activities because they're always looking for that challenge, something new. They fear a loss of control in their environment. Remember, they are all about shaping that environment. And so when they feel like that they don't have control, that is a big fear that a lot of times will cause them to take in all of these behaviors. Every single one of them, when taken to an extreme, then becomes perhaps a dysfunctional behavior. So that loss of control in their environment is very much driving that behavior a lot of times. And they also fear being taken advantage of. Remember, they want to be in control of that environment if possible. So you'll notice with a D person who's got that primary style as a D, they're going to have self-confidence, they're going to be very decisive, and they're going to be risk takers. They're going to be the ones that a lot of times might leap before they look, or even calculated risk. They're not afraid of change. They're not afraid of driving that change. And then when we think about what their weaknesses or limitations might be, they are so task oriented that many times it may seem like that there's a lack of concern for that people side, that other side of things that we were talking about on the model. They can come across as being impatient because they're fast paced and they want to get it done. And so again, maybe taken to an extreme, that risk taking could be, impetuousness perhaps. So those are the limitations that come. And as we said, each one of these, we're all going to have these strengths and weaknesses and different motivators and fears as we walk along through each of the styles. So let's carry on and talk about the I style. So you remember that the I style is up there on the top portion of the model, up there with the D, because of that communication style that we talked about, because of that faster pace. So these folks, though, remember, they're on that right-hand side of the model where they've got very much that people orientation or relational orientation. So they're very collaborative. They're all about some teamwork. They are very charming. Remember, they're influential. They like to influence people and to get people on board. So when we think about them in teams, they're the ones that are kind of talking things up, your cheerleaders, so to speak. They're also very energizing. They're great communicators and they like to communicate a lot and they've got a lot of energy. Remember that pace again. Because of that people orientation, they can be very trusting. They're gonna believe in you until you give them some reason not to. They're gonna be on your side until you give them some reason not to. Very enthusiastic. They're very excited. Like I said, kind of like I always think about a cheerleader. With that fast pace, they've got big ideas a lot of times. They can also be very impulsive, kind of like the D in a little bit different way, but certainly like the D because of that faster paced and kind of bigger picture ideas. They're very optimistic. They're typically going to be your glass half full or all the way full overflowing folks that are always looking for the bright side. And they're also very persuasive. If we look at that word influence that defines them, they are very persuasive because they are very good communicators and very people oriented. All right, so if we were to pinpoint some songs that would help us to understand that I style, Celebration, they truly are your party people. Like they are always a big time and always looking to have a big time. And so they are, they're getting everybody on the team excited, perhaps in a work situation and getting everybody on board. And again, another one would be Don't Worry, Be Happy. So that optimism that shines through, and they're all about liveliness and getting people together. So 2 songs that would help understand them a little bit better. Okay, so let's look at some more information about that I style. The I style emphasizes shaping the environment by persuading people. So by getting people on board and talking to people and getting people involved. Their strengths are that they are excellent communicators. They're really great at communication. They're good at making a favorable impression because they are really, seeking to make those connections with people. They're very enthusiastic and very entertaining, and they are all about group participation. So they're really the glue of the team a lot of times when we think about in a work environment. They're getting everybody involved and making sure that we're hearing from everybody. So those are their strengths. They're motivated by that social recognition because they do have such a people orientation. Remember, their behavioral intent is that they want to get appreciated. They are motivated by doing things in groups. They do not thrive if you put them off by themselves and make them, sit in a corner by themselves all the time, because they really do thrive in being collaborative and working together. They're motivated by those relationships, freedom of expression, freedom from control and detail. So your I folks they're going to have great ideas and they're going to be super excited about them. But when it comes to actually executing sometimes and really hammering out those details, that's more of a weakness for them, as we're going to see. So they fear things that are those fears that drive their behavior. They fear that social rejection, disapproval from others, and that loss of influence, again, because they have such that people orientation. When you are pinpointing different people and kind of looking at them and observing their behavior, you'll notice that these are your people that are super excited. They're usually charming and very social. They're the ones that will go and introduce themselves to a room full of strangers and not have any qualms about that at all. They're going to be very persuasive and very expressive. So we said that communication is a way that we really can begin to, that's probably our biggest clue to figure out what somebody's primary style is. And so those I folks are going to be the ones that are gesturing a lot. So, you can probably guess, I am an I. I get excited when I'm talking about something that I care about. And I certainly use my hands a lot when I'm talking. So those are going to be some of your indicators that person's probably rocking that primary I style. Their limitations or weaknesses they can be impulsive. So we said they're that big picture person and they're very excited about it. But with that comes, that lack of detail sometimes. So that lack of follow through might occur. They may be disorganized, can't find their stuff because they're kind of working at a fast pace and flitting here and there. And then we said they're really good communicators, but sometimes if you take that to an extreme, then they're too talkative. They're talking too much. So you're probably beginning to notice a pattern, if you have not already, that whatever a style's strengths are, when we take them to an extreme or we put them in a point of stress, they become the greatest weakness. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. It's about using whatever that strength is, but not overusing it so that it becomes your biggest limitation. Okay, so moving on to the S style. That S, of course, stands for steadiness, and some of the words that we would use to describe them are these folks are going to be very calm and they're going to be very patient. Remember, they're down on that reserve, that bottom portion of the model. And so they are very, very good listeners. They're very predictable because of that steadiness. They're very deliberate in their actions, that slower pace again that we talked about, and they're going to be very stable. They're going to be very warm because of that people orientation. They may come across as being passive because a lot of times, they want to get along, so maybe they're not rocking the boat, so to speak. So they may just, sit back and let some things go. And your S folks are very loyal. So to my mind, this S style, when we think about that in the framework of a team, there is no better definition really of a team player than a person who has that S as their primary style, because they are all about, because that people orientation, they're all about the team, what's best for the team. And if they're on your side, they are going to be on your side. So they're going to be your team players. They're going to do whatever you need them to do for the greater good of that team. And so if we picked some songs to define them, Like a Rock would be one because of that steadiness, and I'll Be There for You would be another one because, again, of that loyalty and that stableness that they provide in a team. Okay, so let's look at their hallmarks here. That steadiness style, they emphasize achieving stability. That's what they're gunning for. Remember, they want to get along. Can we get along? So they are all about achieving that stability and accomplishing the task by cooperating with others. That should say not other, but cooperating with others. So as we said before, it doesn't mean just because they're on that people side that they're not concerned about the task. Certainly, in a work environment, we're all concerned about getting the task done. But the way that they get the task done is to ensure that they are nurturing those relationships, that we are working together, that heart of the team is being accounted for and taken care of and nurtured as well. So their strengths, they're very calm, they're very patient, they're very loyal. We can count on them. They're going to follow through, and they are extremely good listeners. So while that I's a really great talker, the S's, because they're more reserved and listening more and more internal a lot of times, they're going to be great listeners. They're motivated by infrequent change. Again, that steadiness that they're gunning for. So they don't like a lot of change. They do value stability. They are motivated by sincere appreciation and cooperation and using traditional methods to keep that steadiness going for them. Their fears are that loss of stability. So we see the importance of that here, really defining this style. So they really feel things being messed with. They fear things being messed with. They fear the unknown. They don't like change. They don't like unpredictability because they're all about just getting along and staying steady there. So with them, you will notice that they are, again, patient. That's just such a big descriptor for them because they are that team player that I mentioned a while ago, that stability. They're going to have a methodical approach to things. So they're really going to think about things before they act on it. They're going to be calm. They're going to be really easygoing, and they are generally going to be concerned for the group or for the team. Their limitations then are that they are overly willing to give. So notice again, as we contrast the strengths and the limitations there, those strengths that they have when overused can be, perhaps the doormat syndrome with the S's, that they are so intent on getting along that maybe they're giving up something that they don't really want to. So overly willing to give, putting their needs last because they are so focused on other folks, and maybe even some resistance to positive change. So we know that, change is inevitable and that's going to happen. But even with positive change, it's hard a lot of times for that person with that primary S style to get on board because they kind of like things how they were. All right. Now, finally, our last style that we're looking at here, the C, which is stands for conscientious. Our C folks, some of the adjectives that we have here to describe them, they're very cautious. They're very systematic. They're very private. Remember, they're more reserved. They're very objective. So they're very much about facts and hearing all the facts and kind of extracting emotion out of it. They're very analytical, diplomatic. They're very accurate and very reserved. Okay, so they're really they're truly processing. They're the ones that are really internally processing everything that's going on before they act or make a decision. So some songs that would help understand that C style are Johnny Cash, Walk the Line, because they are very much the rule followers and systematic and as I said, fact finders a moment ago, or the old disco hit, some of y'all probably never heard of, Take Your Time, Do It Right, because that's what, if we go back and think about their intent, their behavioral intent is that they want to get it right. It's all about accuracy and details and quality. So they're going to take their time, but it will be done right. It will be done right for depending on those C's. So let's look at what they emphasize. That C style is going to emphasize working within circumstances to ensure quality and accuracy, because that's what they're looking for, is getting things right and making sure that they are quality. Their strengths are attention to standards and details. They're very analytical thinkers, so they're going to really look at all components before they make they're not making any rash decisions. Trust me, they're going to be very intent on accuracy and being diplomatic. They're motivated by clearly defined performance expectations. Tell them exactly what you're expecting of them. They love that. They'll rise to it. They'll meet those expectations, but they want to know exactly what needs to be done or what's expected. They're motivated by quality and accuracy being valued. They are motivated by an atmosphere that is more reserved and more businesslike and articulated standards. So they, again, they have more of that task focus rather than the people focus. They're going to be more internal and thinking things through. Their biggest fear is criticism of their work, because they are so intent on accuracy that they really fear criticism, that they did not do a quality job. Slipshod methods by other folks, perhaps, situations that are emotionally out of control. So they're very close to the vest, as we said. They're going to be much more reserved, and so bringing a bunch of emotions or blow-ups or something like that is going to be very disconcerting to a C style. And so with them, you will notice that the behavior, it's going to be very cautious. They're the ones that are, you always think about the old saying, measure twice and cut once. That's them. They're not going to cut anything. They're not going to eyeball anything. They're going to be looking to make sure that it's accurate before they ever act on it. They're going to be precise, as I said, diplomatic. They're going to be much more restrained. Sometimes a perfectionist, you might use that word to describe the seed, because they do want it done just right and very factual. Tell me the facts. So their limitations are that they are overly critical of, we said others, they hate criticism of their work. They're going to have a high set of standards, and they're going to certainly hold themselves to it and hold others to it as well. So they're very self-critical, and they're going to have a hard time making a quick decision, because they need time to process all that, and they need all the facts before they can make a decision. So they're going to be maybe very slow in making decisions if they don't have all those things in place. They are rule followers, and so because of just following those rules to the T there, sometimes maybe creativity might be hampered, or they may be hampering creativity as a result of that. Okay, so let's look at these 4 styles again. We said that communication and how a person communicates really is your number one indicator as to probably what somebody's primary style is. So let's begin to talk about the D styles. And this will make sense to you, just all of these details that we have outlined regarding each of the styles. None of these communicating styles will come as a shock to you. So we know that Ds want to get it done, and they work at a fast pace, and they are direct communicators. As we mentioned a while ago, you rarely have to wonder what a D is thinking. They are going to tell you in no uncertain terms. So when we're communicating with these styles, or any style, of course, we're just walking through each of the 4, but when we're thinking about communicating with different styles that are different from ours, it's very important to begin to determine what somebody else's style is, and that we kind of meet their style. So give them the bottom line. Tell them what you need to tell them, and let them move on, because they're moving. They're trying to get, they're getting this done, but they probably got 800 other things that they're going to get done over here. So be brief. They don't want a whole big story and a big bunch of details or anything like that. Be brief and speak up. Speak your mind. They're going to be very assertive communicators, and they are going to respond best when you are communicating in that way as well. Focus your discussion narrowly. Okay, so don't get in and start talking about one thing and then let that balloon over here to something else. Again, get to the point with these folks. That's how they communicate, and that's how they appreciate being communicated with. Avoid generalizations. Not just big broad picture, but give me some specifics here. Refrain from repeating yourself. That's, again, they want you to be direct and to the point. And Ds want you to focus on solutions rather than the problems. So they are very much a get it done, take care of business. Remember, that was their theme song, or one of their theme songs there. So when we come communicating with those D styles, there may be a problem, but don't just come in there with the problem. Come in there with what can be done about that, because that is how they're going to roll. When we think about communicating with the I styles, remember, they are really people-oriented and relational. And so when we are communicating with them, share your experiences. They want that personal story. Ds don't want a personal story, but those I's do. So share your experiences. Allow them time to ask questions and to talk, because it's very much a two-way street with that I. They want it to be engaging and interactive, that it's, that you're both sharing ideas. Focus on those positives. We said they're those very optimistic people, and so we want to try to focus on the positives as much as possible in any given situation. Certainly avoid overloading them with details. We talked about their very big, broad idea, and they're going to be excited about it. But if you start giving them a bunch of details, it's just gone. They're not going to be able to process that. So they're not going to be your detail folks. So when we're communicating with them, try not to overload them with too much details. Don't interrupt them. Again, they're your talkers, so engage them, talk with them, and not just at them. show respect for that spontaneity that they have, because they do have that, and that's valuable to us. That high energy and optimism, that's great, of course, in a work situation and on a team. So, try to value that when they are, when they are getting people excited about whatever it is that you're going to do. Give them props for that. That S style, that steadiness, remember, they're going to be a little more reserved, but they certainly have that people orientation like the I's do. So we want to be personable and amiable with them. So again, how are you doing before you just jump right in and start barking an order at them? How's it going? You okay? How's your weekend? Whatever. Be personable and amiable with them. Express your interest in them as a person. Again, because of that relational emphasis that they place on things, that's going to go a long way with communicating with that style. Let them know what you expect of them. As we said, they're your team players. They are loyal. They're stable. If you tell them what you expect of them, but we got to be kind of detailed with that. If we know what we expect of them, if they know what we expect of them, then they're going to rise to it almost always, because they want to get along and they want to do things right. So take time to provide clarification. They're going to process much more slowly, like that C style. So allow that time that you are able to let them kind of digest that, and then to provide clarification, discuss it. Be polite. They're very polite. So be very polite and gentle with them. Avoid being confrontational or too aggressive. This is a big one. That steadiness, we start reckoning with that, or that person feels like we're not getting along, and that's that behavioral intent. That's going to shut them down. So we're going to handle that. It's going to look very different than if you're dealing with the D who does not mind that confrontation at all. And then finally, with that C style, we know that they're those analytical, factual people. So when we're communicating with them, come at them with facts and details. If you just have, as I said, I'm an I, so I'll just kind of contrast that. As an I might have some big, great, wonderful idea, but it's just this big, broad thing. If I'm going to go and try to communicate that to somebody who has a C style, yeah, I've got a great idea, but I know that they're going to have a lot of questions about, well, how are we going to do this? And what's it going to take? And what's the budget? And all of these things. That C is not going to think it's a great idea until you have come at them with some facts and details about how that idea is how it's going to play out. So make sure that you're equipped with that. Minimize that pep talk or emotional language. That is a huge turnoff with them. Where that's going to work great for an I or an S, that's going to be a huge turnoff for a C. So we want to, again, try to extract that emotion out of it, or kind of just telling them what they want to hear. They want the facts and they want the details. They want every bit of it, the nuts and bolts. Be patient, persistent, and diplomatic. So again, they're very analytical, and whatever it is that we're communicating to them, that's going to have to churn around just a little bit. They're going to be much slower. They're processing. And so we have to be patient and allow that to happen, and make sure that we're giving them that time to turn that over and really come to something that they're going to be comfortable with. Respect their preference to work independently. So they are a lot of times going to prefer to be alone. They're where that I can't stand to be off in a cubicle by themselves. The C thrives on that. So, allow them to do that at times if possible. Don't be put off by their more detached approach. So they are very much that task focused. It doesn't mean that they don't care about people at all, but their approach is going to be way less personal than those other sides on the right hand side. So it's not you, it's how they operate. So it's just important to remember with all of these styles, it's just different than mine. It doesn't mean that they don't care about me. It means that they're really processing things. And so that is just, they are so intent on getting things done correctly that it takes a longer processing time, and they may not be as personable as some of these other styles. Okay, so here we are back again looking at our model as we begin to wrap up things here. And so there it is again. You see, it's really the beauty of this is really understanding. So when we talk about the different styles of communication, it's when, as I said, I'm a big influence person. I'm a very high, very big ideas and enthusiasm and all those kinds of things. In contrast, and this happens all the time, my husband is very much a C. So I have learned in almost 28 years of marriage that, like, to effectively communicate, because we communicate completely opposite, that if I want to, run something by him, or I want to get him on board to do something, I can't just go, hey, I've got this really great idea. I've got to come to him, and I need to have probably a spreadsheet and all these factual things that he's going to look at and think about for a long time before he makes a decision. And so that is the best way for me to communicate with him, even though, primarily speaking, our default, it's completely different. But I've learned to, and he has too. He does the same thing for me. So if he comes at me with something, I don't want a whole big bunch of details. The circus music is going on in my head. If you're giving me too much stuff, I've already, you've lost me. So he knows just to kind of give me, the big things. So it can be done across the board with all of these. It's just a matter of figuring out who is it that I'm speaking to, and how can I best approach them. So rules about others are, different is not wrong. Different is just different. And when we think about the DISC styles in the context of working together, there is richness and diversity. It would be tragic to have a team that was all one style. All of them were Ds. It would be terrible. If they were all Is, also terrible. If they were all S's, bad, not getting anything done, also C's. If we are all exactly the same way, we're leaving something out, right? So those D's, if we had a team full of D's, they are getting things done. But if we have a team full of D's, who's driving the bus? We're all trying to take charge. We may not agree on what that it is that we need to get done. And it goes across the board. The I's are going to have great ideas, but never execute anything. The S's are waiting for somebody. They're going to jump on board that bus, but they are not going to want to drive it. And then the C folks are everything is going to be perfect, but are they ever going to agree when it's perfect? All these people who are really intent on getting things done, getting them done right. So there is richness and diversity. Let's really quickly wrap up looking what this looks like on a team. So team roles. Every style is bringing something to a team environment. Those D folks are bringing the big picture goals and tangible results, because they're all about getting it done. They're your bottom line organizers that can lead an entire group in one direction, right? So they're getting behind the wheel and driving that bus a lot of times. They place great value on time frames and seeing results. So they are, again, fast paced, and they're all about getting them done. And we're gonna they're good at setting those deadlines and sticking to them. And they may challenge the status quo and think in a very innovative way on a team. So they're going to be thinking outside of the box. They're your risk takers. They're really not afraid. They're really kind of take charge people. So they're going to hopefully many times take that team to a place of innovation. The I's, those influencers, they are creative problem solvers who can think outside the box as well. They're very creative. They're very people oriented. They're gonna take one idea and run with it, and something else will come off of that. So they're always those big picture people too. They're great encouragers and motivators of others. So they really bring the enthusiasm and are your cheerleaders on the team. They're going to keep that environment positive with their enthusiasm and their very positive approach, and a lot of times their sense of humor. And they're going to keep things light. They're going to help negotiate conflict and keep the peace, again, because of that people or relational orientation that they have. That S style, we called it, they said, these are really our team, the embodiment of the team player. And so they're reliable, they're dependable. We can count on them. If they're going to show up every time, and they're going to get their things done. They're patient, they're good listeners. And they're really about tending to the heart of the team and making sure that we're all getting along in a harmonious way. They're going to strive for consensus, and they will try very hard to reconcile conflicts as they arise, because they want to get along. They want to keep everything steady. They're going to be compliant toward authority, and they are going to be your loyal team player, as we mentioned. They're very good at multitasking and seeing those tasks through to completion. So that is what they are bringing to the team. Finally, our conscientious or C folks, they're bringing perspectives to the team. A lot of times they're going to be the voice of reason or the anchor of reality in team thought. They're going to bring people back to, okay, well, what are the facts here? Let's make sure that we're taking those things into consideration. They're going to think through every detail and, very, very step by step to make sure that it works before we execute. They're going to make realistic estimates and voice problems that they see in a plan, or, they're always striving for that accuracy. They're going to be even-tempered. Again, they're not going to be, caught up in emotion or anything like that. And they're going to complete the tasks that they've committed to and be very, very thorough. So we know we can count on them. They're going to be taken care. We don't have to worry, is it correct? That those C folks are going to ensure that for us. And they're going to take a great pride in accomplishing that and doing that accurately. They are great people when you think about tasks to be done, to analyze, to research, and to test information. All right, so as we wrap up here very quickly, Abraham Maslow said, "I suppose it's tempting if the only tool that you have is a hammer to treat everything as if it were a nail." Well, we see here, we're not all nails, and so if we use the correct tool, if we begin to maybe back off of our primary style and meet that person where they are, then we're going to be much more successful in communicating and being productive and working through things. And so the gold or platinum approach, we've all heard the golden rule is to do unto others as you would have done to you. But hopefully what we've learned here is that what appeals to you might not appeal to me at all. So take it further to that platinum, more valuable than gold then. And in their book, Tony Alessandra and Michael O'Connor in their book, The Platinum Rule in 1998 said, no, let's do better. Let's do unto others as they'd like done unto them, which might look very different than what you would want to have done. So choose that platinum approach, find out what makes people tick, and then go from there, and you'll be much more successful. And then your final thought is from Benjamin Franklin: observe all men, thyself most. So we can observe behavior, but we can also observe our behavior, and we can modify that to be much more successful in dealing with others. All right, so that is all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over for any questions or any final thoughts.
Amy, for this great discussion and tips on the DISC assessment and the ways that we can utilize that in our work environments. Also, we want to thank the WKU Alumni Association for this partnership and preparing this webinar for today. Also, we want to thank each of you that have joined us for this webinar during its live broadcast and of those watching through the recording. If today's session has you wanting more, please contact the Office of Continuing and Professional Development. We have numerous training offerings for your personal and professional growth, as well as training needs for your workforce and place of employment. There are several links on your screen that outline some of those offerings in today's topics. For more information on non-credit professional growth opportunities, you can always contact our office, the Office of Continuing and Professional Development, for more information. Our next session will be on Thursday, July 15th, which is Communication in a Virtual World, which is still timely, but I think we are kind of going back to a little more in person as well, but it will still stick around. So that's it for me. And Anthony, I'll turn it over to you for some final words.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kara, and thank you again, Amy, for taking and distilling a pretty hearty conversation down into a pretty tight hour as a D and a C combo. I definitely appreciate that. And for those that are just now learning DISC, this is a great introduction to it, and I continue to encourage you to seek other advanced kind of ways and approaches to do that. Not only learn more about it, but to also then learn how you and the teams that you work with can use this as a tool to help communicate with each other and work together more effectively. So thank you so much for joining us for this webinar and its recording. There are additional webinars that we offer throughout the course of the month, as Kara mentioned in the next in the series, and then others that you can find on alumlc.org/WKU to see all of our webinar offerings. Thank you again, Amy, for your time today, and we will see you again next month.
Okay, see you then.